The rain pounded against the old farmhouse windows, a steady rhythm against the howling wind. Jake sat on the couch, a half-empty whiskey glass in his hand, while Lisa curled up beside him, wrapped in a thick blanket. The glow of the television flickered in the dimly lit room, casting shifting shadows against the wooden walls. It was a quiet night, the kind Jake had come to love since they moved out here, miles away from town, from people, from anything. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the front door. Jake's fingers tightened around his glass. Lisa sat up instantly, her body tense, eyes wide. They looked at each other, waiting. Another knock. Louder this time. More urgent. Who the hell would be out here this late? Lisa whispered, gripping Jake's arm. A voice followed, muffled by the rain. Please, we need help. Lisa stiffened. Her nails dug into Jake's wrist. Don't open it. Jake hesitated, staring at the door. They were miles from the nearest neighbor. The roads were flooded. No one should be out here. Another knock. Then, from just outside the living room window, a voice whispered, "We know you're home." Lisa's breath hitched. Jake felt his stomach twist into ice. Something was very, very wrong. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. The rain outside wasn't loud enough to drown out the eerie silence that followed the whisper. Another knock. Slow. Measured. Lisa's grip on his arm tightened. "Jake, don't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He swallowed hard and forced his voice to remain steady. "Who's out there?" A brief pause. Then the voice returned, closer this time. "We're lost. My wife and I need help." Lisa's nails pressed into his skin. She whispered, "Ask his wife to speak." Jake hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Can your wife say something?" Silence. Lisa's breath hitched. Jake felt it too, that creeping wrongness, the unnatural pause before the response. Then finally the voice answered. "Yeah, but she's not next to me right now." Lisa's fingers trembled against his arm. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving along the porch. Lisa's eyes darted toward the back of the house. The footsteps weren't just on the porch. They were circling the house. Jake's throat ran dry. Lisa whispered, "They're not alone." And then from the kitchen, a soft creak. Someone, or something, was already inside. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The sound had come from the kitchen, inside the house. His grip tightened around the armrest, his mind racing. He hadn't heard the door open. Had it been locked? Lisa clutched his arm. "Jake, we need to hide." Another knock at the front door. Deliberate, taunting. Then the voice spoke again. "Jake, open the door." Jake's stomach twisted. His hands turned ice cold. Lisa's lips parted in shock. She shook her head frantically. They knew his name. Jake forced himself to stay calm. "Who are you?" No answer. Instead, a soft tap against the living room window. Jake turned his head slowly, heart pounding. The blinds were down, but behind them, the outline of a hand pressed against the glass. Lisa gripped his arm harder, her breathing shallow. "They know we're here." Then, metal scraping from the back door. Jake shot up from the couch, his chest tightening. Someone was trying to pick the lock. Lisa fumbled for her phone. "I'm calling 911. Jake clenched his fists. He didn't need to tell her. Help wouldn't come in time. A whisper drifted through the door. "You should have let us in." The power cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. Lisa let out a sharp breath, her phone screen the only glow in the farmhouse. The hum of the refrigerator died. The only sound left was the rain and the slow creak of the back door. Jake grabbed Lisa's wrist and pulled her toward him. "Stay close." His voice was low, controlled, but his pulse was racing. A thud echoed from the front door. "What?" Twice. The third hit rattled the frame. Lisa whispered, "They're inside." Jake's stomach twisted into knots. He listened, footsteps. Soft, deliberate, moving across the wooden floor. But they weren't coming from the front door. They were coming from the hallway. Lisa's breath hitched. "Oh my God." A shadow flickered just outside the dim glow of Lisa's phone. Someone, tall, thin, stood at the bottom of the staircase. Jake yanked Lisa toward the steps. They bolted upstairs, feet pounding against the wood. The whisper followed them. "You can't hide." Jake shoved the bedroom door shut and locked it. Lisa pressed against it, her voice barely audible. They were already inside before they knocked. Jake's fingers trembled. The door had never been locked. Lisa's breath came in short, panicked bursts as she pressed her back against the door. Jake stood in the dark, his hands shaking. He needed his shotgun. He stumbled toward the closet, reaching blindly. His fingers grazed cold metal and he gripped the shotgun tight. His heart pounded as he loaded a shell. Then, the whispering started again. Not from outside. Not from the hallway. From inside the bedroom. Lisa's phone cast a faint glow, barely illuminating the room. Her eyes widened. She pointed a trembling finger toward the open closet. Jake felt ice rush through his veins. He hadn't left it open. A slow, wet breath came from the darkness inside. Lisa whimpered, pressing her hand over her mouth. Jake stepped closer, shotgun raised. He swallowed the lump in his throat, then yanked the door open. Nothing. Just hanging coats, shifting slightly. But the room smelled different now, damp like soil, like something rotting. Then, a noise from outside. Jake turned to the window. The barn doors were wide open, a dim lantern flickering inside. Lisa whispered, "We are not going out there." But Jake already knew. They had to. Jake's fingers tightened around the shotgun as he stared out the window. The barn doors stood wide open, a dim light flickering inside. Lisa clutched his arm. "We need to stay here." "No," Jake whispered. His eyes darted toward the truck parked beside the house. They could just reach it. Then from outside the chanting began. Low, rhythmic, unnatural. Voices layered over one another, growing louder. Jake peeked through the curtains. Figures stood in a circle around the barn, dressed in black, their faces hidden behind blank, white masks. A sound made him freeze, a deep, guttural scream from inside the barn. Lisa whimpered, "Jake, please." He grabbed her hand. "We run. Now." They crept down the stairs. The front door stood open, swaying in the wind. Lisa stiffened. Someone's in the house. A masked figure stepped from the shadows of the kitchen. Jake fired. The shotgun roared. The figure staggered back but didn't fall. Didn't scream. Instead, it laughed. Lisa bolted for the truck. Jake followed, heart hammering. He yanked the door handle, locked. Lisa's sobs mixed with the chanting. The figures were closing in. Then Lisa screamed. Jake turned, she was gone. A breath. Warm. Close. A whisper in his ear, "You should have let us in." I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the price. A 200-acre farm in Texas with a century-old farmhouse, sold to me for the price of a rundown apartment in the city. I didn't ask too many questions, I just wanted to start over. After my divorce, I needed peace. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one knew me. This farm seemed perfect. The real estate agent seemed too eager to sell. He handed me the keys without much conversation, barely making eye contact. I joked, "What, is it haunted or something?" He didn't laugh. The farmhouse was old but sturdy, 2 stories, wide porch, peeling white paint. The land stretched for miles, surrounded by endless cornfields swaying in the wind. No neighbors. No noise. Just the kind of solitude I was looking for. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. A heavy silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that makes you feel like you're not alone. I shrugged it off. Probably just the house settling. That night as I lay in bed, I heard it. A slow, creaking footstep. From the second floor. I hadn't been up there yet. And I was supposed to be alone. I stayed in bed, holding my breath. The creaking from upstairs stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. Thick. Suffocating. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise. That's what I repeated in my head until exhaustion pulled me under. The next morning, I decided to explore the second floor. The staircase groaned under my weight as I stepped up. The air was different here. Stale. And used. The hallway was lined with dusty picture frames, black and white photos of people who must have lived here decades ago. Their eyes seemed to follow me. Then I saw it. A locked door at the end of the hall. Every other door was open, revealing empty bedrooms, but this one was shut tight. A rusted padlock dangled from the handle. I tried turning the knob. It wouldn't budge. Something about that door sent a shiver down my spine. Felt wrong. I grabbed my phone and called the real estate agent. "Hey, do you know why one of the rooms upstairs is locked?" Silence. Then a click. He had hung up. That night as I lay in bed, I heard it again. Footsteps. Stopping right outside the locked door. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening. The footsteps had stopped outside the locked door, but the house felt different now. Like it was breathing. By morning, I convinced myself I was overthinking. It's just an old house. Nothing more. I stepped outside, trying to clear my head. The morning air was crisp, the sky stretching endlessly over the cornfields. I had a full day of work ahead. Fencing, clearing weeds, fixing up the barn. Hours passed, sweat dripping from my forehead, until I caught something from the corner of my eye. A figure. Tall. Standing deep in the field, half hidden by the corn. I turned quickly, but nothing. Just endless rows of swaying stalks. My heart pounded. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But that night it happened again. I was closing the barn when I saw it, a shadow standing at the edge of the field. I called out. No answer. I took a step closer, but the moment I blinked, it was gone. Then the farmhouse door creaked open behind me, and the faint scent of cigarette smoke filled the air. I rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart hammered in my chest as I locked every bolt. The air smelled stale, tinged with cigarette smoke. I had never smoked a day in my life. The house felt occupied, like someone had just been here. I needed answers. I went upstairs, my hands still shaking. If there was something in this house, I had to know. I searched the bedrooms, opening drawers, checking the closet, and that's when I found it. An old, leather-bound diary, tucked away in a nightstand. The pages were yellowed with age. The name scribbled inside? Frank Miller. The last owner. I flipped through the pages. At first, it was normal farm talk. Repairs, weather, the occasional complaint. Then it changed. Something is out there in the field. Watching. It gets closer every night. I hear footsteps in the house. I think it's in the walls. I tried to leave today. The truck wouldn't start. I know what this place wants. It wants me to stay. The final entry was half-written, the ink smeared as if someone had been pulled away mid-sentence. That night as I lay in bed, the breathing returned. This time it was in my room. I didn't move. I couldn't. The breathing was low and slow, just a few feet away. My body stiffened, my fingers digging into the sheets. I wasn't alone. I forced myself to turn my head. Nothing. But the room felt wrong. Heavy. The air thickened, pressing down on my chest. Something had been there. By sunrise, I made up my mind. I had to leave. I grabbed my keys and rushed outside, barely stopping to breathe. My truck was parked near the barn. I yanked the door open, shoved the key into the ignition, and turned it. Nothing. I tried again. The engine wouldn't start. Panic crept into my chest. I glanced up, heart hammering. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Leading from the barn. Fresh. They led inside the house. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. Then movement near the porch. The front door was swinging open, slowly as if inviting me back in. And then, a flicker of movement in the window upstairs. The locked room. Something was waiting for me. My stomach twisted as I stared at the upstairs window. The curtains shifted like something had just moved behind them. I wasn't alone in that house. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking, and tried calling anyone. No signal. I ran toward the road, but deep down I knew I was too far from town. Too far for help. A gust of wind sent a chill down my spine. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen. Then I heard my own voice. It came from the porch. You can't leave. I turned, heart hammering. No one was there. I stepped backward. My foot landed on something solid. I looked down, a pair of old, dust-covered boots. The same ones I had seen in the house when I first arrived. A whisper brushed against my ear. You're home now. Darkness swallowed me. When I woke up, I was standing in the cornfield, staring at the house. The paint was peeling. The porch rotted, collapsed. The windows, broken, blackened. It was abandoned, like no one had lived there for decades. Then I saw him. A man in the upstairs window, staring at me. He had my face. I should have known something was wrong the moment I stepped onto the porch. The farmhouse had been abandoned for years, but the air still carried the scent of smoke and damp wood, like someone had been inside recently. The paint peeled in strips, the windows were coated in dust, and the wooden steps groaned beneath my weight. It felt untouched, yet lived in. I hesitated before unlocking the door. The place had belonged to my grandfather before he vanished. No trace, no note, just an empty house left behind. The sheriff called it a disappearance with no foul play. But that didn't explain the footsteps in the cornfield. I stepped inside. The silence was thick, pressing against my ears. Dust clung to the furniture, the air smelled stale, but something felt off. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft, distant, coming from the field. "Daniel, come here." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The voice sounded exactly like mine. My chest tightened. I was inside the house. So who the hell was calling me from outside? I stood frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The voice had been distant, almost blending with the rustling corn, but there was no mistaking it. It was my voice. I turned toward the window, forcing myself to look out at the field. The cornstalks swayed in the wind, their golden tops bending under the fading sunlight. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed out of place. But the air had changed. Thicker. Heavier. I swallowed hard. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was just exhausted from the long drive. I shook the thought away and turned back toward the house, deciding I'd check the field tomorrow in the daylight. That night, as I unpacked my bags, I kept glancing at the window. The farm was completely isolated, miles away from any neighbor. There shouldn't be anyone else here. Just as I sat on the edge of the bed, ready to dismiss the entire thing as my nerves messing with me, I heard it again. "Daniel, come here." Closer this time. I gritted my teeth and stepped toward the window, flicking on my flashlight. I aimed the beam toward the edge of the cornfield. That's when I saw it. A figure standing between the rows. Still watching. I called out, "Who's there?" The moment the words left my mouth, the voice called back. But it wasn't an answer. It just repeated exactly what I had said. "Who's there?" The same tone. The same hesitation. Like an echo, but wrong. My stomach twisted. The voice wasn't just copying me, it was perfectly mimicking me. I gripped the flashlight tighter, my fingers clammy against the handle. The beam flickered slightly as I swept it across the cornfield, my breath coming in short bursts. The figure was gone. But I hadn't heard it move. I took a step back from the window. My pulse pounded in my ears. The only sound was the whispering rustle of the cornstalks shifting in the wind. I needed to get a grip. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. I grabbed my phone and checked for service. Nothing. Typical. Out here in the middle of nowhere, I might as well have been cut off from the rest of the world. I locked the doors. Checked the windows. Double-checked the back door. Still, the house felt too open. Too exposed. I decided to sleep with my bedroom window shut. As I lay in bed, forcing myself to breathe evenly, I heard it again. Not from the field this time. From the front porch. "Daniel, let me in." I bolted upright, my chest locking tight. The voice was right outside the door. And then, a slow knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. My own voice just beyond the door. "Daniel, let me in." I sat up, my body frozen. The knock wasn't forceful, it was patient. Deliberate, as if it knew I was listening. "Daniel, let me in." My own voice, softer this time, almost pleading. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. I reached under my pillow, pulling out the old hunting knife I had found in my grandfather's drawer earlier that day. My hands shook as I crept toward the front door, my bare feet soundless against the wooden floor. The house was dead silent. I hovered by the door, heart pounding. Slowly I reached out, not to open it but to check the lock. It was already unlocked. My breath hitched. I knew for a fact I had locked it earlier. I pressed my palm against the door, steadying myself. I had 2 choices. Open it, or wait for whatever was out there to force its way inside. Then just as I reached for the deadbolt, the voice changed. It wasn't mine anymore. It was deeper. Wrong. You shouldn't have come back. The words sent a jolt of terror through me. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the wall. The knock came again, harder this time. Panicked, I turned and ran upstairs, slamming my bedroom door shut. I needed answers. I tore through my grandfather's old belongings, throwing open drawers, digging through dusty shelves. Then, hidden beneath a pile of rotting newspapers, I found it, his old journal. The pages were torn, stained, covered in frantic handwriting. One entry made my breath catch in my throat. It learns. It adapts. First it echoes. Then it calls. Then it takes. The final page was smudged, incomplete, as if written in a hurry. If you hear your own voice from the field, it's already too late. A loud bang shook the house. The front door had swung open. And then footsteps on the stairs. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Each one sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I clutched the journal to my chest, my breath shallow. Whoever, whatever, was in my house was coming upstairs. I grabbed the hunting knife from my nightstand, my fingers slick with sweat. The only light in the room came from the moonlight streaming through the window. I strained my ears, trying to count the footsteps. They stopped, right outside my bedroom door. For several seconds there was only silence. Then a soft knock. "Daniel, open the door." My stomach twisted. It was my voice again. But this time it wasn't whispering. It sounded flat, empty, like something trying too hard to sound human. I took a step back. The doorknob twisted. I held my breath as it slowly turned, then stopped. And then, just as quickly, the footsteps started again, only now they were going back downstairs. I rushed to the window, my heartbeat slamming in my ears. The front door swung open on its own. In the moonlight I saw it. A figure stepping out into the field. Moving between the rows of corn. It was me. Same height. Same posture. But its movements were unnatural, jerky, too smooth, like it wasn't used to walking. It disappeared into the stalks without a sound. I barely had time to process what I had just seen before the air turned ice cold. From somewhere deep within the field, my voice echoed back to me. "Daniel, come here." Then the cornstalks began to move. Something was coming. I backed away from the window, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The cornfield was shifting, but there was no wind. The stalks swayed, parting like something was moving through them, coming toward the house. And then, from the darkness outside, my voice called again. "Daniel, come here." It was closer now. Too close. I gripped the knife tighter, my hands shaking. My only thought was to run. Get to the truck, get off this damn farm. I wasn't staying here another second. I bolted down the stairs, barely stopping to grab the keys from the kitchen counter. The front door was wide open, the night air pressing in like something alive. The truck was parked near the barn. I sprinted toward it, feeling the thick, damp grass beneath my feet. My lungs burned as I ran. Then, a flicker of movement. I turned my head just for a second, and I saw it. Standing at the edge of the cornfield, standing perfectly still, was me, or something that looked like me. Its head tilted slightly, its mouth stretching too wide in a smile. It lifted a hand and waved. I threw myself into the truck, shoving the key into the ignition. The engine wouldn't start. I turned the key again, and again. Behind me, I heard the soft crunch of footsteps approaching. Then a whisper. "Daniel, you shouldn't have come back." The last thing I saw was my own face peering into the truck window, before everything went black.